brother, sister, and it did hit me right here. And we all have our own stories. Life isn't always easy, and sometimes you're confronted with sometimes the unthinkable, and there's someone you care so deeply about, and when you see them in pain, you just want it to end. This happened with my own mother, a vibrant woman who gave her life to others. When she was 70 years old, she started a home for victims of domestic violence because of what she had to deal with when she was a child, and she wanted other kids to come to a place of healing and love, and so she never stopped giving back, even later in life. And so, to see her lose her voice and have her ability to function because of ALS was hard for all of us. We watched the decline over many, many months. And so your stories made a difference. And what we're going to do in a few minutes, and you all need to be my witnesses to this bill signing because it's also in honor of your loved ones. This bill is in honor of your families. But we'll do this, and hopefully this will spare those who want to make the choice, and it is a choice. It must be a well-informed decision, by someone who is fully capable of making that decision without any pressure. But when we can finally give that choice and not have government stand in the way of a very deeply personal decision, I know that there'll be other families in similar circumstances going forward who collectively will make the decision with their loved one, to enter into the next life without so much pain at the very end. So, Lindsay, I want to thank you for being an extraordinary leader and helping us harness these stories and bring people together to help me get to what was a difficult decision. There's a lot of religious conflict within me, the way I was raised and the issues, but I also have realized it's not about me. It's about 20 million New Yorkers. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Governor Hochul, for welcoming us here. This is such an incredible moment for us. It's very emotional. The advocates and I in this room have all lost somebody who's dear to us. And we know that this is such an incredibly difficult decision. This is not an easy one for anyone. We also know that New Yorkers around the state, the majority of whom sort of want medical aid and dying for their loved ones who are terminally ill at the end of their lives. They don't want them to suffer. They want their loved ones to die at home, or they want themselves to die at home surrounded by family and friends. And my late husband, Yusuf Cohen, was the first public advocate 10 years ago for medical aid and dying, and I and several others have been working toward this end for over a decade, trying to move in this direction. So it's a very emotional moment for us, and we greatly appreciate your courage and your bravery and digging really deep into your own heart to find what's important for New Yorkers and continuing to uphold notions of bodily autonomy and individual rights and permitting people at the end of their lives to die peacefully, those who are suffering and have terminal illnesses. I ended up taking my husband, moving to Oregon in 2016 so that he could access Oregon's Medical Aid and Dying Act. And he recorded a video for all legislators just weeks before he died, asking them to pass medical aid and dying. And while he didn't have that option himself, he really would have preferred to have had that choice here in New York. And so I'm so glad, my son and I are so grateful to you for moving in this direction to permit all New Yorkers to not have to do what we did.
It was a long journey for you.
It was a long journey. Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Yes.
Your husband would be proud of you.
Yes, I think that he would.
After 10 years, you never gave up.
Yeah, we hung in there. Yeah, we really did. And so did all these other thousands of advocates who have worked toward this end. Thank you.
Powerful.
Thank you. We're just going to take 1 minute to excuse our press from the approach. You can follow me, guys.
Assemblymember Amanda Septimo. And Assemblymember Al Taylor.
And ma'am. Perfect. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Jones Austin, Lindsay Wright, Assemblymember Amy Paulin, State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel, and please join me in welcoming the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good afternoon. First, I do want to acknowledge my heroes in this fight. As I sat and talked to our incredible advocates, some who've been on the journey for a decade, I said two words come to mind. One is courage, and one is love. They're here because of they're courageous people, would not give up the fight. But someone touched them in their lives, someone that God put into their lives, that they loved so deeply, that they continued on a journey, not knowing how it would end, but they never gave up. So let me acknowledge Lindsay Wright, you'll be hearing from her shortly, Stacy Gibson, Kate Sanford, Barbara Thomas, Eric Westman, and Manmona Yin. And I want to thank them. Let's give them another round of applause. Our faith leaders, our advocates from Compassionate Choices and End of Life Choices New York. We're also joined by Jennifer Jones Austin, the CEO of the Federation of Protestant Welfare Agencies and a member of my Interfaith Council. And also we have a number of legislators in attendance, Linda Rosenthal, Assembly Member, Amanda Septimo, Assembly Member, and Al Taylor, Assembly Members. But also the authors of this. And I want to thank them for their perseverance, their passion, their willingness to listen, as I have done for many months, sometimes longer. Assembly Member Amy Paulin and Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel. Let's give them a special round of applause. As I mentioned, I just wrapped up a small conversation in my office with our champions here, and each one of them had a powerful story. And it made me realize, kind of brought back some memories of my own story with my mom. A strong woman, someone who did get a chance to see me become a member of Congress, but passed 2 months before I was nominated to be lieutenant governor. And she was always at my side, and I was at her side when she was in her final months fighting a debilitating illness, ALS, that robbed this woman who'd dedicated her life to being an advocate for victims of domestic violence, families in stress. She became a great social worker and put her heart out there, cared for people, opened up a home for victims of domestic violence when she was 70 years old. For her 70th birthday, she didn't want a party. She wanted us to buy an abandoned funeral home. That's Mom. And bring it back to life. And I remember going over there with cans of paint, fixing it up. The basement was creepy and scary. And turning it into a home of love and life that she wanted to be able to give because she had been denied that when she was a child. That's the kind of mom that I lost to a disease that robbed her of everything, including her own voice. And that's what I was reflecting on when I heard about a son, husbands, brother, from these great champions. So none of us are immune from that. Such is life. And so is death. Two forces in life that are inevitable. And so I was moved by their courage, and I wanted to help them put an end to a decades-long journey and say, you can rest now. Your loved one has been honored in a way that is profound. And to the extent that you're still wounded, suffering, questioning yourself, may you rest in peace yourself in this life. May you not have that trauma and that angst any longer. That's what I wish for all my friends here. So I'm proud to announce that after weeks of negotiating with the legislature, we are now going to be making medical aid in dying available to New Yorkers going forward. I reflected on this and something I spent a lot of time writing, and I thought about our country too. What our country was all about, what it was built upon, what was the core belief. And it was about individual rights, respecting people, their ability to worship whom they choose to worship, to be able to speak freely, to assemble. And these protections were enhanced over time. LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, reproductive rights. We've always, especially in the state of New York, proud of our progressive beliefs in moving progress forward and individual rights that are so sacred to us here in New York and in this country. And realizing that government sometimes stands in the way of those individual rights. That's what I reflected on. The founding fathers 250 years ago envisioned a more limited government, focusing on individual rights. And it is that confluence of thought that brought me to where I am today, processing also the fact that I was raised in a strong Catholic family. And for many, this is a moral decision, a moral judgment. And there are members of the faith community who will not accept or understand this decision I've made on behalf of not myself, but 20 million New Yorkers. No one has to do this. It is a choice, but a choice that is made in a situation that no other state is asking for. You need to know this, I needed to know that when I heard voices of some who feared duress, that there be someone who was tired of taking care of someone with a disability or someone who was elderly and just said, I can't do it anymore. That there could be coercion, duress, and pressure put on people. And I was concerned about that. And I said, how can we get out from under that? That everyone will know that someone who makes that decision did it of free will, not under pressure. And so those are some of the constraints I put around this. They're not impossible, but they give me the confidence to know that those voices that were so concerned about this, that I've addressed them. I have addressed them. Also, to ensure that someone is examined by doctors, and also an individual who can determine, does this person have the capacity, the mental ability to make this decision? I need to know that. I needed to know that someone truly only had 6 months to live. So the concerns, again, people in certain communities who said, they've had a lifelong disability or illness, a doctor has to say you have 6 months to live and that is it. That is what we're saying is one of the guardrails here in the state of New York. And this is for New Yorkers. And any hospital, because of their religious beliefs, who does not want to offer this is not going to be required to. Not going to be required. I need to let them have their free will as well and let them operate in the moral or religious environment that they choose and believe is important. I need to protect their rights as well. But in so doing, I believe we've crafted an elegant solution to a problem that people have fought for but also wrestled with for a long time, because I want you to know I did not arrive at this lightly. But my last thoughts were sitting at a funeral, a Catholic funeral, Saturday morning, this past weekend. And I heard the priest talk about being called home to eternal life. And I realized we're not talking about ending life early. or about ending dying early. And so people can transition, surrounded by family, loved ones, not in a hospital bed with strangers at a time when they just slip away after grueling pain, sometimes just unbearable for a loved one to even witness. That, to me, is what dignity is all about. And if a New Yorker chooses to have that under the circumstances we pre-designated, then who am I to stand in their way? That is where I am at today with this decision. So we have our safeguards. You can read them all. But this is one of the toughest decisions I've ever made as governor. So I spent a lot of time on this, talked to a lot of people, but I want these people behind me to know it was their stories that touched my heart the most. Because who am I to deny you or your loved one what they're begging for at the end of their life? I couldn't do that any longer. And that is why I'm here to announce that we have reached an agreement, and I thank the legislators for listening to me and my concerns, and to reconfirm that New York will always continue to be a bastion of freedom, to worship, to speak your mind, freedom of choice. It's time we finally extend those freedoms to the terminally ill and their families. And so I thank all of you. I thank all of you. Your stories touch my heart. Thank you. Thank you. Let me welcome to the podium the Senate sponsor of this bill, Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor. I'm State Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel, very, very proud to represent the west side of Manhattan. And I just want to thank the governor for her focus on this issue, wrestling with very difficult issues. You know, you talk about government, death, and taxes. Well, you know, this is clearly in that category. And it's one I know she doesn't take lightly, but you had a terrific team with your counsel, Brian Mahana and Karen Pertricelli-Kikio, who helped Amy and me negotiate this bill with our amazing advocacy community. And we wouldn't be standing here today, and I know Assemblymember Pollen agrees, without the countless advocates. Corinne Carey knows who they are by name. Dr. Jeremy Bowl, thank you so much for lending your time, your energy, and your medical expertise in this effort. And I want to thank my Assembly colleagues and my Senate colleagues. The leader of the Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, said in a very tense conference meeting, the question on the table is regarding medical aid in dying. What would you want for yourself or your family members? And I think that's ultimately what helped the Senate come to support this very important legislation. Now, New York State is the 13th state in the country, along with the District of Columbia, to have end-of-life choices for people who have been given a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or fewer. That is a landmark transformation for families across the state of New York. And again, thank you to everyone for their support. You know, this is really, as the governor echoed, about individual liberty, personal choice, bodily autonomy, conscience. And that, I think, is something I think we can all be proud of as New Yorkers, that we have addressed this issue head on. New York should do its duty best to help people to live. But if it cannot, then those who have a terminal illness who wish to die should not be obliged to suffer. And I think that's a fundamental role of government, to limit human suffering. And that's what we're doing today with this legislation. I've been moved through this effort and first got involved through the AIDS HIV community. There was a group called the Hemlock Society, which predated Compassion and Choices. An individual in my neighborhood named Florent Morellet, who owned a famous restaurant called Florent in the village, used to put his T-cell count on the menu board as it declined because he had HIV/AIDS at that time. Thank God he's still alive. But 100,000 New Yorkers died from AIDS and died excruciating deaths. Well, today I think I can say to those who are suffering that we are taking this bold step forward. We wouldn't be here today, though, without the next speaker, my assembly partner, who has helped guide this effort, who walked with me through the wind tunnel, the concourse in Albany, where the advocates stood for months with signs urging my colleagues to embrace medical aid in dying. And it's just such an honor to hand the mic over to the assembly sponsor of this bill, Amy Pollin.
Don't make me cry first. I actually wrote out remarks, which you would think someone with 25 years of political experience wouldn't do, but I was afraid I would cry in the middle, and this way it'll get me through it. So today is a historic day for New York State. I am so proud to stand here alongside our governor, who has shown her deep compassion and love for New Yorkers. She engaged with advocates, listened carefully to diverse perspectives, and helped steer this legislation to its rightful conclusion. Her willingness to take on complex and emotional issues and to do so with grace and resolve has made all the difference. New Yorkers and their families are better served because of her courage and commitment. I also stand here alongside my partner in the Senate, Brad Hoylman-Siegel, who is smart, hardworking, and who fought for this bill in the Senate and got it done. I am so, so grateful. This issue has always been deeply personal for me. My sister died a horrific death from ovarian cancer, and in her final days, she was in such overwhelming pain that she was begging for death. "When am I going to die already?" she said on my last visit there. Those words still haunt me. Her experience is tragically the story of so many others. Many people will never choose medical aid in dying, but they want the reassurance of having it as a compassionate safeguard that offers comfort, even if it is never used. Just the other day, my daughter and I visited a dear, dear friend who has incurable cancer, and she asked me the status of the legislation. She said, "I'm not sure I'm going to use it," but she wants to know it's available for when she's near death and in potentially horrible pain. Reaching this moment has taken more than a decade of work. For 10 years, advocates, individuals facing death, families, health professionals, and legislators return to this issue again and again and again, sometimes in grief, sometimes in frustration, but always with determination and hope. I want to give a shout out to some of my colleagues in the Assembly who worked alongside me and helped champion this bill. They are my heroes. Linda Rosenthal, Amanda Septimo, Al Taylor, and of course, Carl Hastie, without whose leadership and knowledge of the Assembly and incessant calls to members to lock in votes, this would never have gotten done. To the advocates who carried this effort forward year after year. Thank you. Your tireless work, your courage in sharing painful experiences, and your unwavering belief in dignity at the end of life changed hearts and minds across this state. To Corinne Carey, another hero. The advocate's leader. You're amazing. You were our glue. Today is about honoring choice, easing suffering, and affirming that no one in New York State will ever again have to face the end of life without dignity, autonomy, support, and compassion. Thank you, everyone, for getting this over the top. Oh, and I want to call Lindsay Wright to the podium.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Wright. I live here in New York City. 10 years ago, in March 2016, my late husband, Yusuf Cohen, recorded a video that was sent to the legislature asking them with all of his heart to pass medical aid in dying. And the bill, as Assemblywoman Paulin reminded me just shortly before this press conference, in its current form, more or less, was presented and to the Assembly in May of 2016, just 2 months, 6 weeks after he died, my husband died. And today, this is such an emotional moment for all of us, the advocates in front of me and behind me, for Governor Hochul, for our Assembly and Senator leaders in front of us and behind me, for all of the work. It takes a village, no, it takes a state to get something like this passed. And when he was dying of advanced lung cancer, so this was what he sort of urged us to do. And we ended up moving to Oregon so that he could take advantage of that state's medical aid in dying because it wasn't offered in New York State. And he promised me, turned to Corinne Carey and said, when I'm gone, she will take up the mantle of advocating for this bill. And so 10 years later, we are almost at the finish line. And it is an incredible moment that has, taken this long, but will benefit New Yorkers, so that we greatly appreciate. I think this is an incredible moment, an act of kindness and compassion by Governor Hochul especially. Thank you for reaching deep into your heart and listening to all New Yorkers, the majority of whom want this option at the end of their lives for their loved ones and themselves, those of them who are suffering from a terminal illness, so that they can die peacefully and choose how they end their lives, just as they chose how they live their lives. And that is what is so important to all of us. And thank you so much for that generosity. We deeply appreciate it. Thank you. And I do want to give a shout out to Compassion and Choices and Corinne Carey and Amanda Kavanaugh for your leadership. We couldn't have done this without you. We walked the halls of Albany. We sent Valentine letters, cards, and Christmas cards, and Hanukkah cards, and New Year's cards, and emails and phone calls to all of our legislators and to the governor for 10 years, and really worked hard to get this done. So thank you, everybody, for all of your support. We couldn't have done it without you. Now I'll turn this over to Jennifer Jones-Austin.
Good afternoon. First, I just want to thank you all for your work. I, too, am an advocate, and I understand well how hard it is sometimes to believe in something and to have to keep at it, and sometimes it takes years to see it materialize. And so I just want to commend you all for staying the course on something so important as this. I decided to come today and to stand with Governor Hochul and with Senator Holman Siegel, and with Assemblymember Paulin, and with all of you, for one very simple reason. What you're doing here is seeking to honor, to respect, and to protect the deeply personal decisions, the desires, personal desires of New Yorkers and their families in one of the most difficult moments that a family can ever go through. I am in the faith business. I tell people all the time I'm not a faith leader, but I am a leader of faith. And as a child of God, born, raised in the church by a very prominent faith leader in this nation, I strongly believe, my faith compels me to believe, that God gives us life to help fulfill God's purposes. And when we fulfill God's purposes, God calls us home. But I also believe that God does not want God's children to suffer. I believe that with all of my being. And I'll share with you personally, as a cancer survivor, given a diagnosis of a rare form of leukemia, and just 2 days later after being diagnosed, being put into a coma, and my husband being told that I had just 48 hours to live, a 1% chance of survival. Clearly, I survived, right? But when I came through, I was told that the recurrence of the illness was very likely, and that the chance of imminent death was likely as well. Having lived that, I believe that I can stand here with you and empathize. Different circumstances, but still, I can relate. I can empathize with having an experience, like as an individual or a family member being given less than 6 months to live, certainty of death within 6 months, and being desirous of not living out your days just waiting to die, of having children, family members, not wanting them to suffer, waiting with you to die. My children, when I was ill, they were just 12 and 7. And I remember thinking, they can't live like this in perpetuity. I remember thinking about my 12-year-old daughter, who was aware of what was going on, how she was being affected, how still today at 28, she lives with that trauma. It doesn't have to be that way. I didn't want my husband to be emotionally burdened any more than they already were. Death matters are deeply, deeply, deeply personal. And government needs to understand that. Government needs to honor that. And that is what is happening in this moment. By ensuring key safeguards, guardrails to protect New Yorkers who are faced with a grave outlook and their families, Governor Hochul and Senator Holman Siegel and Assemblymember Paulin and all of the legislature are doing their part. So I just want you to know that I'm here mainly to thank them and to thank you all. And as a person of faith, I'm going to walk with you because this is important. This is necessary for New Yorkers and to be a model for the nation. Thank you all.
Okay, folks, we have time for just a couple on-topic questions only. Sid, go ahead.
Talking about guardrails, based on what you just said, what if the medical conclusion is wrong? This is what we hear from some of the critics of the bill. How do you handle that sensitivity? What if that 6-month time period isn't correct? How do you approach that?
Well, that's why we also have a waiting period in there. And I wanted to have safeguards if someone learns of a different prognosis. This is also why we have, two, not one, but two doctors, two medical doctors who have to confirm this, but also, someone with a psychology background to confirm the mental state, the ability to make this decision. But even for someone who says, I want to do this, 5 days to say, I want to change my mind. And that's what was important to me. That's why I added that period.
Okay, go ahead. Governor, in regards to the pushback, and if you wanted to walk us through how you were able to overcome your own religious reservations and moving forward your relationship with religious leaders in the state, how you're looking to overcome that given that they are so staunchly opposed to this legislation.
No, I had conversations. I spoke to some of the top faith leaders in our state. I also have an interfaith clergy council. I convened my executive committee to share with them my thought processes, and I said, you don't have to agree with me. That's all right, I understand. This is a moral decision for you, a religious decision for you and the people who follow you. But I can't stand here, even as a Catholic, and say, I can't allow someone else to do something that I perhaps would not do. I cannot stand in their way. And that's the foundation of our nation. That's why I went back to 250 years of us honoring the role of individuals with government not blocking their way. And that's why government did put in safeguards to get me to a certain place, but I could not be the one who finally says, no, you do not have that choice. Do what you may choose to do with the final months of your life. I couldn't do that. And I'm hoping that they'll give me some grace, continue to pray for me, as all of them said they would do, as we continue to focus on issues affecting the living, making sure that we work together to make sure that our children are fed, that they get health care, they get a good education, they live in a good home. That's where we have unanimity among the faith leaders, and I'm going to continue to work with them and lead with them as we accomplish those goals for those who have much more life ahead of them.
I'm curious about the mental health valuation. Have you given thought, or do the amendments lay out what specifically would count as, not sound? Is that if they're depressed, if they have anxiety, as one might assume someone who has a terminal illness may develop? Or is that something that DOH is going to determine through regulations?
That's why there is a regulation process. I don't want it to be a lengthy process. People have waited a long time, but I want them to do something that can be used as a model for all of our healthcare facilities. I mean, they need to know how to apply this properly. They know that they're operating within the law and also within our regulations. So they'll be developing them and putting together criteria in consultation with mental health professionals to ask the experts, how are we defining someone who has clarity of mind, who has the mental capacity to make this decision for them and is not pressured into doing something that they otherwise may not do. And so it's a complicated area, but I'm going to be asking our Office of Mental Health and our Department of Health to focus on this in the regulations.
Great, that's all we have time for, guys. In terms of, if you have a degenerative neurological disease and you make a decision when you are of sound mind, but later on you are not of sound mind, have you given thought to how to approach this, or is this, again, you're going to rely on DOH?
Well, this is a decision that has to occur in the final 6 months. I mean, there's already been a determination by two medically trained individuals, two doctors, who say you only have 6 months to live. And at the beginning of that 6 months, you can make a decision that, you may want to have it, you may want to wait 3 months. Say, in 3 months, I want to do this. In a week, I want to do this. So I'm not going to interfere with that process for an individual, but this is, again, that finite amount of time with a 6 month diagnosis.
Great, thank you, guys.
People struggling with mental illness, does it?
I can't hear you.
Critics say this sends a mixed message to people struggling with mental illness, does it?
How so?
That people are contemplating suicide, the state allowing it to happen in certain situations.
I reject the notion of that, because these are people with medical illnesses that a doctor says, you have a disease, and diseases are defined, and the elements of the disease, the symptoms of the disease are obvious. So there is that kind of checklist. It has to be a terminal illness, and I think we all know what that means. That is very different from people suffering from mental health. And we at the state will continue to prioritize funding and support systems for those people who are crying for help in life. All right, thank you.
Take care, bye.